Shabbat Shalom. I promised we would talk about that olive in the word Vayikra. So here we are. Why does it look the way it does? Well, there's a special rabbinic tradition about it. We discussed it some last night, so I'm going to return us to that place as a starting place. But there are two possibilities for what Vayikra, and that word, is doing in this place. With the olive, it's Vayikra, straightforward. Vayikra Adonai el Moshe lemor, and God called out to Moses saying stuff, sacrifices. You were reading along, it's fine. But if you take the olive out, the rabbinic interpretation of that, understanding, is that it changes the root of what that word is, and it changes it to a different word. As I was quoting it last night, the word that my buddies, when I was in Israel playing in a band, used to use, greeting each other. Achi, ma koreh? Hey man, what's happening? What's happening? Ma koreh. It's close, but it's different. In that rendering, it would be God happened upon Moses, which kind of softens the thing if we're unpacking it a little bit. The idea God calling out to Moses speaks with a certain kind of agency and intentionality and drive and purpose. And instead, God happened upon Moses. God stumbled upon Moses. Moses and God were in line at the Kiddush luncheon in the same place, and so they got to talking. It's a different flavor, it's a different vibe. Last night we talked about one valence, one possibility of what that happening could be, and I want to return to the traditional one today, which is that, what is Moses known for, everyone? He's not the greatest warrior. He's not the greatest orator. In fact, it says he doesn't talk so good. He's not comfortable going and giving these addresses to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians, let alone to the Israelites, and doing this leadership thing. But what is he noteworthy for, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our rabbi? Yes, David Neff.
To be the greatest of all the prophets.
He is the greatest of all prophets. They say that never again would a prophet rise like Moses, who spoke to God panim el panim. But there is an adjective, more specific than simple greatness, perhaps, that is used to describe Moshe Rabbeinu. He is the most
humble.
Thank you. Humble. He is the most humble. And it's an interesting thing, actually, if your greatest prophet who ever lived, let's combine those two for a second. The greatest prophet who ever lived, the only one who talks to God panim el panim, face to face, is also the most humble. You can kind of hear the record scratch at that moment. Really? It's not Odysseus.
See, that's what's wrong with our world.
Maybe that's what's wrong with our world. Wow. Should just end the drosh there, actually. I wasn't planning on it, but no, you shouldn't be sorry. That is profound Torah as well. Maybe there is pretty profound Torah to be learned in that. I was just going to say it's noteworthy to me that the greatest of all of our prophets is not Odysseus and how clever he is, or Achilles, the greatest god. Because what does the text say? Mitch, you were just reading it. What does it say?
Can they call it out?
Yeah.
It says, this is what you're going to say to the people.
Yes, thank you. You didn't know there was a test at the end of it. No, that's right. It says God called out to Moses and says, this is what you're going to say to the people. That version with the olive wins. The version in which Moses can sort of duck it and just be like this guy, and God happens upon him at the line at the Kiddush luncheon, Doesn't fly. Doesn't sail. What's that?
He might have said there's no meat at this kiddish luncheon.
He might have been complaining about the spread at the kiddish luncheon, and that was why God happened upon him to voice holy discontent over it, but I wouldn't know about that. So, the God version wins. The God version wins. God called out to Moses. Moses, on some level, what the rabbis tell us, would like it to be the version without the olive, and would like it to be God just stumbled upon Moses at the Kiddush luncheon in the line for that, or for anything else for that matter, because Moses kind of doesn't want to be the guy. He says it over and over again in Shemot, in Exodus, like, really, me? Like, can you pick somebody else? Maybe there's a better choice here. There's an interesting discomfort that he holds throughout with it, and yet he's the guy. And God's not letting him off the hook. Not only he doesn't get his way with that letter, it doesn't get to be God just stumbled upon Moses. God whispered in Moses' ear. No, God calls out to Moses, here's the grand plan. Say this to the Jews. So Moses loses ostensibly. Kind of a rough deal, actually, the Moses deal. He never makes it to the promised land in spite of being the greatest prophet who ever lived, spoke to God panim el panim. There's an object lesson in the fact that he is our greatest prophet, and the guy messes up left, right, and center, makes all manner of mistakes. We don't have perfection in human form in Judaism. But it is kind of a raw deal. And I kind of feel bad for him sometimes. And so this is one of these places where the rabbis kind of throw him a bone. And they say that Aleph is really small because we're not forgetting about Moses' humility. God did win that round. God does call out to Moses, but we're not paving over Moses' intentionality and personality and who he was either. We're not erasing it. We're still remembering that there is a piece of Moses that he may not have wanted this thing. Times one gets selected into, perhaps, are not always one's choice. So there's an interesting piece of this. Makes me think about when people talk about my grandparents' generation. What do they call them? Why do they call them the greatest generation?
The World War II.
Well, they went through a lot.
They fought and they won World War II, basically. Saving us against the evils of fascism in their own time. It's a remarkable thing. Do you think they wanted to do that? Do you think they wanted that for 2 hot seconds? Who wants to be the greatest at the thing? You know, like the greatest generation, the greatest prophet. Moses, for being the greatest prophet forever, who ever lives, God rips him left, right, and center. The people complain to him at every other minute. Remember that line? Did you drag us out of Egypt because there weren't enough graves to bury us there? That's what the people said to Moses after he saves them from slavery under Pharaoh. They complain at the edge of the sea. And yet, the greatest. I think this is a thing about some of perhaps the best leaders, and this goes to some of Osnat's drasha here. Some of the best leaders are not the ones who most fervently want it for themselves and will fight tooth and nail for it. Some of the best ones are actually a little bit reluctant, as we see with Moses. There is something about this quality of leadership that actually seems to be served from a good dose of humility. But at the same time, it also needs a certain kind of fortitude and it needs a certain kind of strength. God doesn't let Moses off the hook. We still call them the greatest generation, even as we remember and read at that. I'm thinking about that little bulletin, and every time I read the Jewish name at the bottom, it's almost always somebody who died in World War II. I'll bet that person, whoever they were, might not necessarily have wanted to be the greatest generation, and rather than dying at 18, 19, 20 years old, living a full life, you don't always get what you want with all of that. And yet somehow, sometimes it is thrust upon you the greatness of the thing, and you have to rise to the occasion. So I was thinking a lot about this vis-a-vis the words. It's a Hasidic story, often gets attributed to Rav Simcha Bunim. That he used to walk around, it's said, 2 pieces of paper in his pocket. One of them said on it, "I am but dust and ashes." And not like in the Stardust poetic kind of way, but like I am less than. I am, whatever it is you're needing to sweep off the mirpeset when you're having company over. And then in the other pocket, the other piece of paper said, "The entire world was created for me. The whole world was created for me." And he walks around with both of those pieces of paper in his pocket. And the trick the Chassids would teach based on it is the discipline of when it is you pull one piece of paper from your pocket versus the other one. When do you need to hear for your own self, "I am but dust and ashes"? Or when do you need to hear, "The whole world was created for me"? Moses, if he really is the most humble guy who ever lived, I would buy that more often than not, actually, he needed to pull the piece of paper that said, "The whole world was created for me." He probably needed a hefty dose of that if we take the rabbinic tradition seriously, that he was like a super humble guy and never wanted to be about him. But I think the idea there from the Chassids is that it's not really one or the other. And I can think of folks, perhaps in this world, who might benefit from reaching into their pocket and pulling the piece of paper that says, "I am but dust and ashes," and reflecting on some of that, not to get too pointed or into current events. But the idea is that there's balance between the two. And that's the aleph right there. Doesn't get excised from the text, but you don't get it at normal size either. You actually have to hold it in balance. Yeah, the translation, it gives it to God, God by a nose, God by an edge, just slightly, but the translation also isn't dealing in the sizing of Hebrew letters. For anybody who is reading Torah or looking at that word right there, it's a little bit of a reminder. Sometimes you need to get checked. You need to take a step back, remember where it is that you are, be very careful. Remember some of your finiteness and your smallness in the world. And then other times you need to pull the piece of paper that says, "The whole world was created for me." If you are getting kicked to the curb by circumstances, it may not be bad to pull that piece of paper, actually. Self-esteem is not a bad thing or a bad word. And so the question is when you have each. And in the middle of a book, framing a book, introducing the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, that's all instruction manual, that's all about the priesthood and what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to live and whatever. I love that they open it with this piece that could go either way. Might be the whole world was created for you. It might be that you are just dust and ashes, but you can read it either way. Dafka, they don't spell it out for you because you need to figure out how it reads and how big that aleph is in your own world, in your own life, this year, next year, this month, this minute even. Because it's a moving target and it changes, and it's something for us to all carry around. That aleph is that reminder that all of us actually may have those 2 pieces of paper in our pocket as well, without having written them down. That you too can pull out a note that says, "I am but dust and ashes," or you can pull out a different note that says, "The entire world was created for me." And that little aleph in Vayikra is a reminder to be judicious and to be intentional about which note you pull out. Shabbat shalom.
Bye.